Hey, oh, it's Wytchtober. We're almost done. I'm really excited to show you this. There's a lot in this video, so we're just going to go ahead and go with it. So, oh, yeah, there we go.
Isborn, 100 miles southwest of the capital, Verenia. The grasses of the western plains swayed gently in the wind, their rhythmic dance the only sound amidst the dying breath of soldiers. Cruel steel flashed, piercing through armor as a lone warrior executed his grim task. Thalric of Karn, with long hair billowing and a thick beard flecked with blood, pulled his blade free from the shattered remains of the knight. The wind whipped around him, carrying the scent of iron, as he surveyed the field of death he had wrought. With each step he moved past the bodies of the slain, knights, horses, spearmen, his own form untouched by blade or spell. The job was done, another slaughter accomplished, with no survivors left behind. Verimus Irallius, the half-elven mage, regarded the carnage with a cold, calculating gaze. Unlike other mages, Verimus did not waste words on grand gestures or elaborate speeches. He was a precision instrument focused on a purpose only he could see. Thalric respected that. "This is the last," Verimus declared, his tone devoid of frivolity. Thalric nodded, his eyes fixed on the distant keep, its fate sealed. "Yes, it will be over soon, and my word will be kept. Not your gold earned, nor your bloodlust sated, but your word. Is that everything to you?" Verimus asked, intrigue lacing his voice. "My word is the death of kingdoms," Thalric replied, his voice low and fierce. "It is the wall that halts my enemies. My oath will never break." "Curious," Verimus mused, his eyes glinting like dark portals. "Would you consider an extension to your contract?" "I'm contracted to you until the end of this year," Thalric shot back, a wry grin teasing the corners of his mouth. "You've already removed the competition from the other houses. What more could a mage want from a simple sellsword?" "No mage is free from ambition," Verimus replied, gazing at the keep as if it were a blemish on a canvas. "The moment one becomes complacent is the same moment they fade away." With a swift gesture, he obliterated the keep in a surge of flames, the gray sky now raining ash. The two stood in silence, watching the blaze consume the remnants of the guard, the grass now dancing amidst the blood and embers of the fallen. The village of Citra, 1 year later. Thalric's eyes stung from the smoke rising from the small hut, the ashes drifting into the sky, peppering his hair and beard, his hands holding the charred remains of what had once held a soul. The woman he had loved, the child he had left alone. Rage barely encapsulated the emotion that drove Thalric's scream, echoing through the remnants of a life he hadn't been there to protect. It was a life that he had provided for, only to see it snuffed out in an instant. Demons in hell could not fathom the fury fueling behind his cry. Bards in their songs would never capture the tragedy of such a profound loss. The one thing in this world he could not shield reduced to ashes in the night air, and the gods themselves could scarcely imagine the elaborate vengeance born from this moment. Verimus Irallius stood at the crossroads, outside what used to be a town. His posture was relaxed, his expression neutral, even as the great warrior whose life he had just shattered approached him. Thalric's eyes were hollow voids, brimming with a burning emptiness, his hands clenched into fists. "Congratulations," the mage's voice sliced through the morning air. "You have completed your contract as of today." Despite the proximity of death, the wizard showed no fear, even as Thalric loomed inches away, envisioning how he could easily snap the mage's throat like a twig. "I would explain to you why this had to happen," Verimus continued. "But you already know." He blinked, calculating his next move as Thalric remained silent, as if he had stopped breathing. "Complacency," Thalric finally rumbled, his voice like distant thunder. Verimus allowed the words to hang in the air, tilting his head like a falcon assessing his prey. "We had arranged a meeting today to discuss your next contract for my services," the mage said. "But now I wonder if that's still intact." Silence devoured the words as they left the wizard's mouth. "I will ascend by the end of this year," Verimus explained. "I will open the gate to the Nether, but I need a bodyguard to aid me in this transitional stage." The earth lay still, interrupted only by the smoke curling in the distance. Verimus held out his arms, echoing his words from a year ago. "I have no intention of fading away, but if you do intend to strike me down, then do so now, while I have taken all but your word." The words struck Thalric like cracking ice, his blood boiling with a fierce intensity ready to transform the cold stare of the wizard into steam. He had lost everything. Yet Verimus was right. He still had his word. He still had his oath. Fallowmourne Tower, 6 months later. Silently, Thalric sheathed his weapon and stepped towards the throne. "I have a proposition to make," he said, as if the room weren't coated in the blood of those who had threatened to tear him apart only moments ago. Verimus arched an eyebrow. "The keep in the east, in Critical?" he asked, his premonition confirmed by Thalric's nod. Since his ascension to power, the mage had used his abilities less to evade blows from enemies, and more to cut conversations short, granting him time for more inspired pursuits. "I have men in mind to start it," Thalric's gravelly voice echoed in the chamber. "Knights to protect the houses and maintain order," the icy mage quizzed. "Those men will start an army. They will not fail. Do you think you can convince the dwarves to allow you to use their keep?" "I have something they want." Irallius looked puzzled by this last remark. His foresight, granted by the ice dragon's heart beating miles below, hadn't predicted it. The warrior stood before him, motionless, having passed every test and defied every calculation, all in the name of his unbreakable vow. "Your word, your Knights of Critical will not fail in their duty," the wizard stated, locking eyes with Thalric. "My oath," Thalric replied, nodding as he turned to leave. Varia, 5 years later. The horses seemed to sense the stench of fear radiating from the small boy as he approached the rider who had called out to him. He wanted to bolt back into the cottage, but there was no cottage, no village, only the wreckage of the mage's wrath from the night before, and the 3 imposing men sitting above him on horses that seemed to have crawled out of a horrific tale. "What do they call you?" asked the man with a massive sword on the roan horse. They call me—" "Don't stutter, answer!" barked a stout man on a chestnut mare, his axe gleaming with a red stone set in the center of its blade. "Ardwin," the boy managed to choke out. "Of what house, Ardwin?" asked the man with long hair and a beard. His voice was gravelly and his eyes were as dark as his mount. "No house," Ardwin stuttered. It's all gone. They came and—" "Not your house, the house that did this to you. The house that did this to every hovel in this valley." The sharp voice hit Ardwin like a blow, causing him to step back. "Well?" "Thalric, you're scaring the child." A voice like silver materialized as a woman emerged behind Ardwin. He looked up in shock at the figure who had rescued him from the interrogation. She wore a long, flowing robe as white as a swan. She had hair that made the chestnut mare look dull, and a gaze that pierced through the tension between the men and the boy. She had silver eyes. But Thalric was unsatisfied. He dismounted and approached Ardwin, who tried to back up and hide behind the woman. Surprisingly, she held his shoulders steady as the knight, dressed in a suffocating gray cloak, knelt, his eyes leveling with the boy's. "Call Rhyme," Thalric stated. Ardwin blinked. "That is the name of the Lord's house that turned your home into a steaming pile of rubble. The name of the mages that melted your sister's flesh and boiled your father's bone in acid. And do you know why?" The boy blinked again. He felt no tears, no emotions until now. Just moments ago, he had been in a state of shock, but something in the man's word ignited a fire within him. Thalric continued, his descriptions of horrors intensifying the boy's internal flame. With every word, a newfound rage boiled. Ardwin screamed back into the knight's face, his small body inches from the man's piercing eyes. He looked into those sockets that held a flame, the same flame Ardwin had felt. "He's ready," Thalric said, mounting his horse and riding off, leaving the silver-eyed steel collar to the boy whose glare never left the knight. Cratagor, 3 years later. The scream echoed throughout the halls as the sorite was poured into the device which viced the boy's arm in place, branding it with the mark now gracing the forearm of the mountain, sitting across from the dwarf, who pretended not to hear the pleading cries echoing across the stone. "How many more days?" Thalric's voice interrupted the grim atmosphere, heavy with impatience. "You ask us for more sorite and steel. Then you ask us how many more days?" The dwarf shot back, his irritation barely contained. "Do you want to keep building the Imperium, or do you want to—" "No! Don't even speak of it! His mind is in mine!" Thalric roared, his fury palpable. "Only answer the question." The dwarf sighed. "The steel collars say your knights are almost in every great house. If that's so, then assuming you don't call for any more knights to be—" Another scream interrupted the report, echoing through the stone walls. "Built, then we should be able to concentrate our efforts on the digging." The dwarf's gaze fell on the man whose eyes had disappeared in the darkness long ago, replaced with a single-minded vengeance. The same vengeance he had promised years ago in exchange for this keep, the steel in his sword, and the magic-canceling sorite being grafted into the screaming boy's veins. "I'd say 3 months. You have 2 months. He's close to it. Make it work." Fallowmourne Tower, 2 months later. Irallius had never smiled, but he couldn't deny the elation coursing through him. Before him lay the equation to everything. The answers to a lifetime of waiting, observing, and calculating. Here it lay. It was physical, painted in the ice of his tower. The Nether Gate. Tonight he would unlock unlimited potential, the power that no mage had approached in 2 centuries. He would finally learn the secrets that all mages lusted after. But then, an odd sensation gripped him as the ritual began. Like a premonition, but odd, was all he managed to utter before the Cratagorian steel sliced the air where his head had just been. The axeman's body whirled, and the wizard reappeared behind the assassin, raising a hand to wipe away the blot of this man. But his fingers seemed to have a mind of their own, leaving his palm to flail uselessly as the long sword's blade flung them in an arc. Irallius blinked, staring at the nubs left by the gnat who had just dared to attack him. With a flick of his wrist, Verimus shot him back into a wall with an invisible force. "I didn't see you," the puzzled mage uttered. "Why can't I?" The axe struck again, nearly tearing the archmage's head from his shoulders. The mage recoiled and lashed out with a spell, only for it to meet a third blade, splitting its energy in 2. Thalric of Karn stood before him, eyes dark, meeting Verimus's surprised gaze. Fallowmourne Tower, 20 minutes later. "You keep trying," Verimus remarked, stepping through puddles of blood. His blood, that spread across the chamber. The bodies of the knights lay sprawled on the floor in their own pools, yet the mage seemed unfazed, his essence remaining vibrant, his wounds not weakening him in the slightest. He truly was immortal, unkillable. You cannot stop progress. You can't even slow it. The Imperator sneered, his blood tracking towards the ritual circle where the spell had carved a rift in the air. The Nether awaits, and I alone will introduce it into our world. The knights' bodies twitched, unable to rise after suffering blow after blow. Their leader grunted, grievous wounds marring his frame, yet he still growled at the mage. You, Verimus looked down. Is this what your word has come to? What has happened to your oath? Irallius looked pityingly at Thalric, who struggled to hold on to life, but a burning flame flickered in his eyes. Fallowmourne, miles beneath the ice. The heart beats, the pickaxe swings. The dwarves worked like machines, their muscles strained, their bodies exhausted, yet their rhythm continues. The heart beats, the pickaxe swings. The heart beats, the pickaxe swings. Freezing in the depths of the ice, working day after day after day, for years, warmed only by their unending toil. The heart beats, the pickaxes swing. The heart beats, the pickaxe strikes something. The dwarf who swung the blow could barely believe his eyes. Years of labor had led to this moment. There lay the heart, beating, writhing, giving life to the evil lurking miles above. The memory of his people's pain and suffering under the archmage's reign flooded him. No more, he shouted. The pickaxe swung, and the heart bled. Fallowmourne Tower. The rift exploded with color as Verimus stepped closer to his destiny. Centuries he had waited for this. His mind's greatest puzzle finally realized. His life's greatest challenge met. His elven blood sang with the energy his ancestors had pursued for so long. His blood floating before his eyes. Verimus's premonitions had never been wrong, leaving him little surprises in his life. Yet when the dwarven steel blade was actually rammed into his back, piercing through his chest, the sorite scorching through his body, severing him from the immortality he had taken for granted, he was baffled. How could he have failed? How could he have not seen? Complacency, roared Thalric, his voice strained as he pressed the blade deeper into the wizard's back. I gave my word, my oath to someone long ago. Someone I would protect, someone I would give everything for. Everything. You let me live. You let me serve you. You trusted my word in a moment where you couldn't read me. My word? My oath was to them, Verimus. My wife, my child. The Archmage's eyes glazed as they stared forward into the rift. Do you see it? Everything you built, everything you fought for. I don't do this for a greater purpose, other than to see you suffer, as you watch everything you made burn. The mage's lips quivered slowly. You would condemn the world to suffer, just to see me fail. Curious. How many did you kill in my name for this moment? Do you even remember them? Thalric's blade never wavered, its thirst for revenge mingling with his own pain. So, you don't. Or you don't care. Very interesting. Very interesting. As Thalric stood in the tower, the rift fizzled away, dying alongside its creator, leaving the warrior in the darkness of his own making. A world world now engulfed in the vengeance and hollowness that burrowed into his soul. Cretogor, 7 years later. The gray-haired man stared into the red and black eyes of the boy before him. No, not a boy, a knight. The lad bore a fresh scar in the shape of a crest of an order the old man had once formed. This child had been brought into the fold early to fight the war. His war. The war that raged on and on, claiming so many. The knight looked up at the strange boy, noting the antlers poking out from the tangle of unkempt hair. "What do they call you?" "Dakin," the boy answered. "Of what house?" "I'm from Ashbridge." "Not that. What house brought you here? The house that destroyed this world and plunged it into war, dragging you along with it." The boy paused, considering the old knight's question, before delivering an answer that pierced the warrior's heart. Cretogor did this.